By awareness, I mean the ability to know what is going on inside, to express what's going on inside, to be aware of one's world, to know what's going on, to see and to hear, and to be aware of those magic moments or peak experiences that have special significance for each of us. More efficient perception of reality and more comfortable relations with it. They live more in the real world of nature than in the man-made mass of concepts, abstractions, expectations, beliefs, and stereotypes that most people confuse with the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the way I'd say it today, it might be more a shortcut. Well, first of all, it's as if they had clear eyes. They seemed to see more, they were more perspicuous. They could see, I remember one of the things that I was so impressed with first was they could see through phonies. They couldn't be fooled somehow. They could spot, you couldn't con them. There was that. And then they didn't seem to come in with a prioris. That is, whatever a thing was, it was. Where for most people, they've got some sort of preconception about it, about what it ought to be, or what it might be, or what the book says it should be, and so on. I think today I would add to that something like the conception of the intuitive, the mathematical genius, who's just born perceptive in this particular style. It was as if these people could come to a good judgment with insufficient evidence. That was it. It's as if they leaped to a right conclusion. And then I might wonder, well, how did you figure that out? I couldn't get it frequently. But they seemed to be correct. They seemed to be right more often. Their judgment was good and sound. I learned this after I was in an interpersonal relationship, I learned to take their advice, and their judgments, their predictions, and the like. This is also, of course, that's the way it started, and this is a personological, clinical impression, but the research we set up once, we never got it done because of money and so on, but the research is quite feasible. It's quite an easy research in principle to do. We were going to select out the healthiest 1% of the college population with the tools that we have, psychiatric interviews, projective workups, personality tests, and so on, and then compare these people in a battery of now I wanted to start with the sensory modalities, 2-point threshold and acuity of color differences and so on. In this sense even, I mean, more efficient perception of reality, that would be the hypothesis that I would test. I'd say there's a 50-50 chance even at that level that they simply smell more efficiently, which we can measure, of course. But in addition to this, with the cognitive tests, I was going to use this Einstellung test, for instance, and there would be others of this sort, the old Woodworth and Sells atmosphere effect of being misled by false syllogisms. I was going to use that in this setup. And in that sense, I would say, I would predict that there could be testably in the laboratory for our healthiest, psychologically healthiest 1% of the population in these functionally and operationally definable ways, just sharper vision, sharper acuity through befuddlement, and not as easily fooled by the nonsense lying advertising that we have. In this sense, more efficient perception of reality.
Continued freshness of appreciation, the wonderful capacity to appreciate again and again, freshly and naively, the basic goods of life with awe, wonder, and even ecstasy.
Mm-hmm. One way to say this is that these basic things are all miracles. If you were to think, how the world would look to you if you were to die, let's say you were told you're to die in a month or two, then how a sunset would look, or how the fall colors would look, or how a cute baby would look, or a pretty girl. The miracles, actually the miracles of life are repetitive. The most important things are flowers and sunsets and so on. Well, for most people, familiarization breeds lack of attention, and it's kind of an adaptation down of the emotional reaction and a loss of reaction. Well, a miracle remains a miracle, even if it happens every morning. And these people somehow, well, I report descriptively, that they just responded to them as miracles, in spite of the fact that they happened a great deal. And this impressed me very much, this recognition of a pretty girl, a handsome man, a fine old man, let's say, and of course babies, flowers, trees, mountaintops. These people just enjoyed them. They enjoyed them freshly. They enjoyed them again and again and again. Whereas for the average person, he'd keep looking for something new all the time.
The peak experience, the mystic experience, the oceanic feeling. Feelings of limitless horizons opening up to the vision, the feeling of being simultaneously more powerful and more helpless than one ever was before, the feeling of great ecstasy and wonder and awe, the loss of placing in time and space with, and finally the conviction that something extremely important and valuable has happened.
Yeah, it's a very good thing for a person. Magic moments, in an article I read today, they were called. Well, there is some history here, which I think would be of interest. In my subjects at first, what I stumbled across, this I wasn't looking for, were what I had to call mystic experiences. There were reports of such experiences. And I had come into this investigation with the normal equipment of the normal person of the culture, thinking that mystical experiences happen to one saint, you know, every century or something like that. And here I kept, people would talk to me in the same words as Saint Teresa or Meister Eckhart or some of these other people that I'd read, the famous mystics. Well, I've put it down that way, and but then kept on discovering more and more that these came from many triggers. They came from all kinds of sources, from the love experience or the being on top of a mountain, or just being taken over by music, or somebody going along a seashore and then just going into this state. And I had to generalize it. And furthermore, I had to strip it of its traditionally, historically religious, specifically religious meaning, because it turned out not to be. The peak experiences came from many, many things, many triggers. Once I tried to generalize them as anything that moves, anything that comes close to perfection. An experience of perfection will produce a peak experience. Whether in athletics, in one of my subjects, a young man breaking through with the ball into an open field and then running down the field and reporting in the same words that ancient mystics had used. This was a 17-year-old boy. Totally stumbling across this by the purest accident of the women in natural childbirth reporting ecstasies of mystic experiences or peak experiences. So what I want to do is to generalize that. I found since that peak experiences do not occur, they're not the exclusive prerogative of one pantheon of people, but they occur very widely through the population. It looks now, and a preliminary statement would be that the higher the degree of psychological health, the greater the frequency of peak experiences, the higher they reach, the more intense they are, and the more illuminated, that is, the more cognitive they are, the more you learn from them. If you see the world in the peak experience in a more pure form, this can be remembered. Some people do remember, some people don't remember. The people who do remember tend to be changed, just as the ancient mystics reported. This, by the way, is being researched with now.
Discrimination between ends and means. Strongly ethical, they have definite moral standards. Their notions of right and wrong are often not the conventional ones. They are fixed on ends rather than means.
A good way of saying that to students, I think, is to say that it's as if these people know what is right and wrong. Now, this cuts them off from a large proportion of the American population who don't seem to know that, or who don't have any right and wrong that's solid and constant, and that they've worked out for themselves. Most people tend in this respect to be other-directed or culturally relative, ethically relative, as to feel not universal about it, not as if there were some universal right and wrong, but only as if it were some local thing, a fashion, rather, a folk way. Then they would speak of mores instead. This is a tricky business because it involves the question of absolute rights and wrong. Well, all I can say is that my people knew what for them was right and wrong. That's a more cautious statement. And they didn't get all tangled up about it, and they didn't get suggested out of it very easily. You couldn't kid them out of it. And I doubt in the experiments that we had, if we had the kind of experiment in which you have 5 stooges suggesting against the person, I don't think it would work with these people. They know what they think is right. Again, they have a kind of an inner Supreme Court, which they refer to, rather than to look it up in a book or what mommy or daddy said or what the local customs are among the other kids. They look within for the answer to the ethical questions.
We have been visiting with Dr. Abraham Maslow, discussing the first 2 broad areas of self-actualization: honesty and awareness.